Hello and welcome to this episode where we are featuring leaders in engineering. Today's guest we have is Kevin McClintick, and he's the CEO of Architectural Wall Systems. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you for coming on our podcast today.
Thanks, Sam. It's good to be here. Good to see you again.
So let's start this off with a bit about your background. It's always quite interesting to know a bit about, obviously you're running your company now, but you have an engineering background. I believe it was application engineer. Was that sort of where you started? And it'd be quite good to sort of see that a little bit about that journey of what took you to from an engineer to actually running a business.
Sure. Very good. I went to school in the state of Virginia at Virginia Tech University, which was Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University when I entered there. Originally, I was pursuing a degree in architecture and quickly changed into an engineering role due to a number of discussions that I had after being accepted into the School of Architecture, and just decided to pursue engineering because of my math background and just some good friends that were architects of the family that knew me around me growing up, and felt it would be a much better push into actually becoming a business owner, or better yet, an opportunist in running and hanging my own shingle, as I used to call it, having a business of one's own. So in that, the degree was civil engineering, major in structures, went on and actually took a job right out of school with a group called the Conair Company, which was an aluminum manufacturing and extruding facility that was north in Virginia in a town called Harrisonburg, about 2 hours outside of D.C. and actually halfway up from Blacksburg to D.C. I grew up on the east coast of Virginia in a small town of Williamsburg. But once working within the industry that I am currently in, which is really architectural wall, cladding, exterior veneer, curtain wall applications, which is the exterior facade work that goes on the outside of any and all commercial structures, working as an application in that area at the Conair Company for just under 4 years really taught me kind of taking the theoretical of engineering and putting it into practice. I really struggled in school within the theory itself. Was kind of an average student my first 2 years, just trying to get my feet wet and independence of going to college. But by junior year and senior year and into the structures field, everything really started to click and make some sense. Got involved into programming my senior year within the language of Fortran, developing software on how to solve statically indeterminate beams. Kind of took the theory out of it and put it from theoretical into practicality. And after that first tenure with the Conair Company, I migrated really just on an importance to increase my salary. Pay at that point in time, back in the late 70s, with me graduating in 77, I was earning $1,000 a month to work at Conair. And through that course of about 3.5 years, pay increased, but it still was relatively small. Headhunter called and placed me pretty quickly in the state of Texas. It was an increase in salary to probably twice that I was initially hired at. So that was really a pursuit of my own, to being married with a child and a second child on the way. Just felt it was something I needed to take advantage of. It was working for a similar company. They, again, were an extruder and a manufacturer of cladding systems. It was the Howmet Group, which became on eventually to be known as Vista Wall. Finally got bought out by Butler and is today Old Castle Building Envelope. So that facility is still there in Terrell, Texas. But I moved to the Dallas area and worked for them not very long, actually. The group that brought me out there left after me being there 6 months and started their own actual engineering and facade group there in the Dallas area, which was known as Texas Wall Systems. But working at the Howmet Group, it left me as the sole engineer with their departure, and kind of abandoned me a little bit, but it taught me a lot. Handling the group, being the only structural engineer amongst 25 draftsmen and running the design and the day-to-day needs of both application kind of customer support for upfront of selling of work as well as production work. It put me on the hot coals and in a fire constantly. I passed my PE exam during that time frame, October of 81. I moved out there in March of 81 and didn't stay on long thereafter. There was some conflict with the actual change of management. Regardless, I decided to take a job with Curtain Wall Design and Consulting, which still resides in Dallas, Texas, an independent consulting group, very well known in the cladding world, and went to work for them. It put me again in more of a consultant's role versus a manufacturer's role, which allowed me to see a lot more individual projects and much of a variety of projects that skilled me as in multiple materials, multiple applications, multiple design concepts, just a much better, quick jump into the pool and survive type of a situation of anything design. So that experience really propelled me to work, which I'd always worked very independently on my own, always very ambitious on my own and trying to drive better applications, better ideas. I always hated to touch things twice. So I was constantly, even at Conair, through the stint with Howmet and CDC, constantly working applications on a programmable computer or on my Apple II computer at Howmet or on the Lisa computer, just involved in computer operations and programming to try to speed up efficiency. I decided at the end of kind of the middle of 85, in June of 85, I was getting a lot of clients while working at CDC asking for behind the scenes help and aid in their design or to take it home and continue the design to finish it up, which I did. It was all about urgency. It was all about keeping them satisfied, and that would allow us to get the next job in the door. So I was a good producer at that point in time. Realized shortly after taking the exam, once I was at CDC, that I had passed the exam, passed it on the first attempt, which was great, professional engineer. And that really brought a lot of confidence along with the exposure that I had in 1986 to just basically, with a discussion with Bob Johnston, who was the founder of CDC, telling him that I really thought I would like to pursue a career on my own. And he was understanding. I mean, that's exactly what he did, and said, well, you can continue to work here, or you can make a break and try to go out on your own. And I thought about it over the course of a couple of weeks, and finally by the end of June, made that decision and went out opposite home, and kind of opened up shop and put the feelers out. And it was very short period of time before the clientele that I was working with while at CDC would throw me some projects here, there, and everywhere. So it was a quick jump start into working on my own and kind of successfully starting my own business. I incorporated in January of 86 and started Architectural Wall Systems. Not really a very creative name, knowing that that's the field that we practice in, but it stated what we do. And from that point, it's been 86 to 2025. It's been 40 years of running the group, managing the group, seeing it grow, go through hardship, and it's taught me a lot in becoming a successful privateer, as I like to call myself, of running my own company for 40 years.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. So tell us a bit more about what Architectural Wall Systems does.
What we do is we can work with a number of different people. Our primary clients are the commercial glazers throughout North America for the most part. We have done work abroad as it has come forward, but we are working with these similar glazing contractors, as they're known, that will design, fabricate, and provide the cladding elements, what we call unitized curtain wall. It's a modular in these days. It used to be so-called stick built, assembling sticks on the side of the building, throwing in horizontals, placing the glass. Now it's all somewhat unitized, prefabricated, pre-assembled, pre-glazed, put together, shipped to the site, and lifted up like a precast panel of concrete and set it in place on the exterior envelope, floor by floor by floor. So those components which make up the assembly obviously need to withstand any and all forces that are on them: wind load, seismic loading, its own dead load, as well as other forces, ice load, snow loads, whatever atmospheric loading is required. That's what we design it to. So those cladding elements enclose the building. It's the first thing that resists any wind load on the building. It's the first thing that actually starts moving with the entire structure in a seismic event. It's an air seal to the building. It keeps everything air and moisture out and maintains the integrity, both air and water and energy in this day and age, efficient during the life of the building. And so it is an intricate, while structural, when you think of structural engineer, you think of massive I-beams, large columns, floor-to-floor sways, floor-to-floor building envelope or building structure, and the cladding is there along for the ride of that structure, which we integrate that to the primary frame. But our purpose is really diving into a section of aluminum that may be 2.5 inches wide by 6 to 8 inches in depth, hanging on the outside of the building. And it's very small componentry. I compare it to building or opening up a watch versus opening up the whole side elevation of a building and seeing the primary frame there. So you're highly reviewed, you're highly critiqued, you're highly overlooked, you're highly watched, because the most litigated industry of a building structure is really the exterior envelope. When it's not performing and it takes on water, or it gets wet, or it's leaking air, or glass starts to break under high wind loads, that is the primary issue that first surfaces and can be really catastrophic to the to needing improvement or remediation in the actual building and the structure. So it's a highly litigated area, and one that is somewhat comical in the fact that even in our insurance requirements, our insurers hate the fact that we're involved in high-rise condominium work, because there versus a private building, you've got one owner, and in a condominium, you've got a whole building full of owners. So if you have one room that's leaking and everything else is fine, you're still at risk because of that one building owner. So we've done that. We continue to serve these glazing contractors throughout the U.S. and kind of create that relationship, that building that relationship, that go-to type of scenario. We have a little bit of as well work where we consulted with architects, we consult with general contractors, we consulted with owners through upfront kind of initial phase of work to just be a subject matter expert to help them pick a system or to pick a contractor or to help develop wherever the project is going to go. So that is something that as well occurs. We were involved in that process up front on the actual Freedom Tower when it was first being re-erected after 9/11, and we're involved with that really up front of the project, along with SOM and the general contractor and the glazing contractor that pulled us in a consulting role to just see if this exterior facade could really be implemented as an appropriate and feasible design prior to actually moving forward on the design. So all kinds of different opportunities from the very early onset to the actual putting them and getting the building built onset of a project that we get involved in.
Sure. Yeah. I'm quite interested in, because you've been running your business for a number of years, what are some of the areas that you think you've done particularly well, or maybe makes you stand out a bit from your competition?
Well, I've always felt it's our personality, it's our culture, it's our ability to relate well in our industry. When I mentioned that we work typically with um, the commercial glazing operation or the glazing subcontractor to the general contractor, I've always made an effort, and it goes back to my troublesome times in school of not relating well to the theoretical, deriving equations with alphanumeric symbols and or parameters or variables. It was always difficult for me to understand that a times a is a squared. I more easily understood 2 times 2 is 4, which is 2 squared. So when I got out of school in going through my second order calculus and all that and all the science that you go through, I just found that extremely hard. But when I started manipulating the numbers into the equations, it just made sense. And our practice is to actually make sense to the layman, to a Sam Leonard, to someone who doesn't understand what we're doing, to bring it forth in a study or in a submittal package that allows you to easily pick up the document and kind of take a walk with us as we've constructed that document to explain the decisions made and the outcomes provided. And so I feel it's more of a client experience than anything else. It's more relating to a level of interaction, communication. I've been very big about trying to teach the craft, to learn others the craft of what we're talking about, and kind of simplify it and take away the engineering lingo, and let's just talk about the facts of what's happening and try to get everybody to fully understand that. So that in itself, as well as just the personality of our company, I think approaching things in a more casual, friendly way, communicative way. And if we're not communicating and hearing each other, then we know that we're not making progress. So, and our success speaks to that loudly because we've never really done a lot of over the typical marketing strategies of marketing. We've done our work, we've shown our work. The people that came with me and provided me work when I left on my own appreciated that skill set and what I brought forward. So that's kind of the magic sauce, as I call it, is just be relatable and and work toward the good of your client. A lot of consultants work toward the good of themselves. You know, they've got 20 initials behind their name. They take a lot of pride in being that expert, or better yet, being the big key to what the project is. And our philosophy is, I'm making you the hero of the story. I'm here to support you, not support me. And if I can support you and make you the hero, every movie every storyline of a movie has a hero, and we always root for the hero. So if I can get them to root for you, then he's going to root for me. And that's the philosophy that we take. It's try to make our client be the hero and make him look good, so that we're not receiving 20 questions on every submittal, that we're outguessing what the questions are and providing that up front. And it's not that we don't get questioned, but we're there to support. We're there as a supporting actor, not the lead star of the role. We are not the lead star. So
Yeah, I like that, being client focused. Very important. So you mentioned a little bit about some of the challenges you face with insurance and litigation. I wondered if you could just go into a bit more detail on some of the challenges of your business.
yeah, it surprisingly, in 4 years we've only had really 3 challenges that cost us dearly or cost us some money. Surprisingly, it was not any structural failure. It wasn't any catastrophic event. It was more, and it's somewhat sad to think, but the reason you have professional liability insurance is really to cover for anything and everything. And so we had a issue back in the late 90s of a client that we were working with, to where it became an issue. All three of these examples that I'm speaking of, it was always first-time clients. So when you go and attend risk management within your insurance salesman's request once a year, the first thing they talk about is it's always tends to be that first time association, because there's not that community, there's not that bond. They have no risk. But in any event, it was an issue with regards to continue work without being paid. So we took the job on. They called out of the need for some immediate help. We jumped on. It was a good client in the Midwestern part of the country, big client, and we agreed to go to work. We were operating at one of our larger staff capacities at that time, had plenty of manpower. So we were able to kind of put the fire out, come in, jump on, move forward. And it was really starting over from what had already been started, from ground zero, and continuing moving forward. And the agreement was that we were going to be paid, every other week to keep the cash flow coming from, since we had made the effort to jump in. And slowly the payments just kind of stopped and then stopped and then stopped. And it got to the point where we were continuing to work and really had not the income to continue paying everybody we had on the job. And I just had to make a decision. Are we going to continue or are we going to halt? And so I said, well, we got to halt on this job. And I gave him a period of, and I need to get some money in the door. So we got into a kind of a pissing contest on that. And in that, when everything was said and done, the job, we got that all situated and moved forward. And once the job was done and over, the contractor had suffered some delays, time delays, wasn't orderly in getting material on the job. And so we were drawn into that litigation of being one of the subcontractors to the contractor. And we end up writing a check just in going through mediation and many, many months of trying to figure out who was at fault and who was to blame and this and that. And again, it wasn't about structural things. It wasn't about performance. It wasn't about doing our work. It was about holding up the job. And as comes out in mediation, anybody and everyone that is at the end of that tends to share in the expense that it took to make that happen. The thing that hurt my heart the most in that story is that the reason we got the job to begin with was the fact that we had E&O insurance. And what came out in testimony from the owner of the company was that the reason we got the job was that there was E&O insurance, and that in all likelihood, this contractor would probably have to be utilizing E&O insurance at the end of the job. And so we essentially got taken to the cleaners on being nice guys, is how I felt about it. And it really disturbed me. I liked work. The gentleman was very difficult to work with and is known in the industry as being difficult to work with. I just had a conversation about this the other day and mentioned the owner's name, who has since passed away. But he said, oh yeah, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. And I've heard that story more and more times, that I don't doubt it. So that was the first one, the first education. The second one was really a minor one. That was really more over a dimensional bust on a set of drawings that we had drawn. I get that. There's material out there on the job that wasn't in accordance. And there again, it was just a proof of, the detail should have been this, the dimensions should have been that. It was fabricating stone panels, not necessarily glass, but some stone. And that one wasn't nearly that big of a mark or that big of a check that the insurance company. I've not had to write any checks other than my deductible. The insurance company has covered all the other ones. The third one was us working as a consultant to the owner. And this shows you that you're not even favored or in being protected working for the owner. And my job at the owner was to help him pick out a system, to pick out materials, to help the architect drive a specification for performance of how the system was going to perform under air and water leakage, which it was a Class A building, which is the top of the class of a commercial building. And so we helped the architect decide limitations of air infiltration, water infiltration, and performance. And as the job went on and moved on, the contractor that was awarded the job, through a lot of circumstances that we don't need to take time on here, but in awarding the job, he went out to erect the job and really went out erecting the job prior to the time that he should have. The system was not proofed through a so-called mock-up condition, which a mock-up condition is a full-scale area, usually about, 30 feet wide by a couple floors tall. You're spraying water on it. You're actually moving the wall with pressure. You're testing it to make sure that it can meet the specifications. And that's mock-up successfully passes, means that you can install the system and get it to successfully pass, provided you install it per the mock-up. Mock-up comes and goes. They can't get the daggone thing to pass. It's not passing. In the meantime, due to delay, they're already erecting panels out on the job. And so all those panels out on the job were not put together in the fashion that the mock-up test showed the way they needed to be put together. So once again, fast forward all of that. At the end of the deal, the system couldn't withstand 0 differential pressure on the job in the field. It had to withstand 8 pounds of differential pressure at the mock-up, which is what it should have withstood in the field. So they had to go back and rework that entire portion of the skin that was already installed. We get drug into a lawsuit. We get into that mediation. It's really a big argument towards the architect, and they're arguing the specification requirements that was stated in the spec being above what was standard care practice. Not true, but in any event, once again, a large check between all parties involved allows the contractor to escape a big portion of the brunt of his failure to do his job in the same fashion as the first cause. So those are the 3 things that just show you that it can go sideways quickly. I've never had a lawsuit with anyone that I've ever done business with more than once. Those were all first-time occasions, which shows you that when you get in a collaborative environment, you're golden. When you get into a dispute environment, and it can come early or it can come late, you've got worry to do. The importance of insurance is you really have to recognize that, because if you don't instigate a claim fund, knowing the first time a possible dispute is known, your insurance company won't bring the matter forward. So as soon as you see that first drop of water going through the wall, you need to be on the phone and let them know that there's a possible problem here. And just the scale of the problem, that's the other thing that's very hard as a owner. Our fees for designing this work it varies, but it's not a tremendous amount of money compared to the value of the curtain wall. So for a $10 million skin, our engineering fee might be 1 to 1.5% of that. It's nothing. And so example 1, we paid $240,000 to that client for the issues of us putting stop on the work for a period of a month to get his payment back in line. 240 grand was probably 4 times what our fee was on that job back then. The second one, the little one, the dimensional thing, was nothing more than a material cost of about $50,000. Not a big deal. The last one, the one, again, as I thought would have been more protected, being an owner rep versus actually doing work on the job, $330,000. My consulting fee didn't come close to that. I mean, it was probably a $25,000 fee. It makes no sense. So it's the equality in that, from my perspective, doesn't make any sense, because our E&O policy for what we have to provide as insurance on these buildings. We do a lot of work for the University of Michigan, and they want a $5 million policy on their work. That $5 million policy can cost, 80 grand. It's insane. So a year-long policy for $2 million is typically about $60,000. So we're in a constant need of carrying a minimum of $2 million, a lot of times $4 million, which you can go buy a rider for that. And we'll carry the $2 million as overhead, but the rider expense, we make the contractor pay for that up front, because they always want it for a period that exceeds X number of years beyond substantial completion. So it's a high risk if something does go wrong, for sure. And it's a high expense, and it's really one of our highest overhead, other than the cost of our people, that we have to maintain with regards to operating the business. So it is a huge risk just in itself, trying to train my people to be aware of when your customer relationship is friendly and when it starts to turn south. And that is a big, stick your hand in the air and let's talk about it, because we need to go on notice that we're having issues here. And we just had one not recently that we managed, I think, pretty well to put out and put the flames out that I was worried about. And it's like I say, it's never been a design issue per se. I've never had a problem with air or water. That's not the issue, or anything breaking or falling that's caused that issue. It's always just been kind of silly stuff. So, and it's usually stuff that has deviated from what should have been. Good case in point, the first one. The system just wasn't tested to where it could have been air and watertight, and it wasn't my problem. It was the fact that the contractor decided to move forward with it. So that is a very frustrating part. But again, it hasn't been. When you're in it, it seems like it's never going to end. But once it's over, it's kind of like most things. Pain eases with time. So
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you mentioned communication there as a big part of dealing with problems. I wonder if you could just, with your journey of building your business, successes as well as challenges, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that entrepreneurial journey, any particular traits you've picked up on, or what you think it really takes to be a good leader.
Well, I think transparency is good, number one, in your communication. Sometimes I feel I'm too transparent, meaning that, wearing your emotions on your sleeve isn't necessarily good, or telling everything that you think needs to be impactful isn't necessarily good, but that's just who I am. So I think everybody would recognize that Kevin McClintick talks truth. He doesn't put a line of BS out there. We're talking facts. And sometimes those facts are hard to take and hard to hear, but that's what I think is important. So in communication with my client, I find that to be very easy, and that's important. And I think everyone generally, there's a couple cases where I've gotten sideways with people in the past, a long time ago. And as you age, as a 30-year-old being hot-headed, and as a 70-year-old today being much more mellow, that you've gone through enough battles on how to handle these things, you can't, in communication, it's hard, other than sharing stories, which I love doing that. It's hard to get your staff to understand everything that they don't know when they need to know it. And it's, you hope that they get a sense of seeing how you behave, how you react, how you settle, or how you get excited and inflamed one way or the other. But that's a hard thing as a leader to do. I've always been a leader to try to show by example. I'm very hands-on in trying to do that, hands-on in trying to show fundamentals of your trade, whether it's engineering knowledge or how-tos, or you just can't install that fastener. Let me show you why. Things like that, specifics. It's just constant mentoring of being patient. And as I just alluded, my patience was less than it is today. And it does take that leadership. I know my communication with my students, or my kids, as I call them, my juniors, my junior staff. I don't call them my kids. I call them my people. But it's hard. It's hard because I'm perfectly clear to myself, but I'm not perfectly clear to them. And so I think that's something that is definitely a trait that I've had to work on. And what I've tried to do is just, like I say, transparency, truth. I'm not saying you're doing a good job. If you're not doing a good job, you're not doing a good job. I need to show you what to do a good job. And I'll show you and show you and show you. And repetition is required in order to pick up a habit. So I get that, understand that. I made a comment the other day to someone, and I said, you just can't, if you're trying to put fluid in a container, the lid has to be off. If the lid's not off, there's no need to try to pour it in the container. That only makes sense. But you have to have an open mind to take what I'm laying down in order to comprehend it and understand it. And that's what goes in the conscious mind. And eventually it will filter into your subconscious mind, that you heard your founder, your Kevin, tell you, whoa, there's a liability issue there. I need to bring it forward. I hope that's what they do. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of patience. So that's what I have found, is no matter how hard you try, that's still an unsolved question. Is you think you're being effective in communication, but you really have to ask the recipient, did you hear me? Did you hear me? And I have a certain individual right now that works for me, and he continually tells me, I hear what you're laying down, Kev. I hear what you're laying down. And I finally, just day before yesterday, I said, do you? I've heard more. I heard what you're laying down, but more than I've seen you take what I've laid down and actually put it into practice. That tells me you're not hearing me. So there are plenty of examples of that through many, many years of trying to communicate internally. And you have a bunch of engineers who have big egos. They're very brilliant. They're very smart. They just don't have any common sense. And that's what mentoring is totally about. And it's, you have to relate those experiences. You learn, I call it common sense. Other people, I think the technical term is inferential learning. You learn through practice, and that's what common sense is. So you have to make mistakes in order to learn from them. At least that's what I do. That's not to say what every other engineer doesn't work that way. Oh, it's just a mistake. It's okay. It's going to be okay. It's kind of like your child. Dad, I'm sorry. Well, what are you sorry for? Well, I did this and I did that, and you're already sorry. You haven't told me what you're sorry for. You haven't told me that you didn't hear what I told you not to do, only to go out and do it. So it's the same thing. And I laughingly call them kids, because sometimes when you're working with 20-year-olds, that's exactly what they are. You're having to deal with that behavior and try to get them to understand. And I have done that. That's been, my practice has been hiring young, developing, turning them into molding the clay, getting them to be a productive engineer. And much like me, many of them are entrepreneurial spirits, and they pick up and they go. And I have done that multiple times, and I'm proud to know that I've got lots of people out there that were competitors today, but there's not a one of them that hasn't picked up the phone and called and continued to stay in touch and tell me how much influence I had, whether it was for 4 years, 2 years, or 10 years. I mean, it's that is gratification, and shows that at least you're respected for the trade and the skill that you provided.
Sure. Yeah. Some interesting insights there on mentoring other people. And obviously that's paid off by the relationships you've built there. So interesting.
Yeah, it's paid off. It hasn't kept them through the doors, but it's paid off. It's good. And I've had one engineer who's gone out and done very, very well for himself. He kind of left the cladding world and went into the residential market. Eventually came back and has a group that does both. And he's one. Tony's one that always calls up, on my birthday, or I call him on his birthday. And he was in Nashville the other day, and he was trying to get to where we could have dinner, and that didn't happen, and that's fine. We've just hiring him fresh out of school and being 30 something years old, and him being 22 years old. He looked at me as an older brother, and we're just still good friends to this day, to where we've been through a lot together. We've been through relationships together. We've been through good times, bad times. And he always had a hope and a desire to be able to buy me out one day. And that was always his chase, is, when are you going to let me buy you out? When are you going to let me buy you out? And I said, Tony, love you. I just don't know if I don't know if I could work underneath you. So you'd have to give me too much freedom, maybe, or better yet, just buy me out and let me go home. Maybe that's what needs to happen. So.
So what are particular trends you see in with your business, or your particular area of engineering?
It's gone through some roller coasters. I know we visited a little bit on that when we first spoke, but it was easy to get started. The work was aplenty. I was able to, after leaving in June, by October, hire a good friend of mine that was working at CDC, Don Carpenter, who I had befriended, and he came on board with me. Hired another gentleman, Joe Solinsky, that was working for a glazer in San Antonio. He came on board with me. So we quickly became a group of 3, and with Joe on board, me on board, and Don on board, we were able to really, obviously kind of triple our output. We were originally I was just engineering work. Then we started drawing work and engineering the work. That got us off on a fast pace and quick. And by 86 to 91, we then were a group of 12 engineers and 1 draftsman, Joe including as well. Joe was trying to finish up his engineering degree. He was going to school at the same time. But we had another draftsman on board. So it grew very well. 91 had a little bit of a hiccup, kind of like the early 80s when it got cold in Dallas. Commercial market went cold. Work was hard in 91. We were working big in Chicago. It was a hot market, one job after another. Probably had a handful of good clients, and nobody had any work. So it kind of came to a creeping crawl, something that we had to weather through. Same thing happened in 2001, 10 years later, with that whole 9/11 issue, as well as the .com bust. .com was rolling hard and heavy, where your Facebooks, all your tech companies were building campuses out in California. We do a lot of work in the California market. Our best clients were in California, and continued to be up until just the COVID years. And they've had a tremendous hardship now. But about every 10 years, there always seemed to be a little bit of a bump. Right now, it's kind of survival mode for a lot of the groups. Our top tier clients, our top 5, being on the West Coast. The West Coast California has been hit hard. That was always good work, fun work. It was complicated work. expensive work, meaning fees were good. Texas market has always been kind of a slim market monetarily. So we do a little bit of work in our backyard when we were in Texas. Nashville has been really hot of recent, but our main clients are more upper end tier clients that are doing high rise work, New York City, West Coast, Florida, in the Midwest a little bit. But a lot of our work as well, our middle tier and our lower tier clients, they're very quick hit, very fast, very profitable projects to work on, very repetitive projects, people that we've helped develop systems and things like that. Right now, we've been in a fall since 2020. That's the bottom line. 2019, we continued to grow. We had an office in Dallas until 2013. We staffed back up to recoup the '08 residential crash, which hit the commercial side in about 12. We were doing all the work in Vegas at that time. So that was another downfall. But right now it's been tough. I mean, 2019 was our biggest year, had our biggest staff at that time. And when COVID hit, West Coast actually closed down all projects. So we took an immediate hit of about $1.2 million off the top of the revenue as that work went on hold. So what we thought we were going to work on went away overnight. So since that 19 kind of you take that off the top, that was hurtful. We've survived, but it's continued to just maintain. Last year showed another dip. This year's showing an increase. But everybody tells me if we can get through 25, 26 looks good, 27 looks good, Trump will be out of office. And not that I agree that may be a good thing for some. It's not, I think our economy has turned around for sure. It's just that nobody with interest rates has started pulling the trigger and getting back into private building. We're doing a lot of work on university work, public work, back into just whatever we can get. So it's a tough time right now. So we call it scratching and clawing just to get the work in. It's become, when work is good, when work is plentiful, you'll issue a proposal. We would win probably 9 out of 10 proposals that we would put out. Today, we're probably winning 6 out of 10. So everybody is looking to cut cost. And if they can cut cost in engineering, even though we don't feel the fees are warranted in cutting those costs, with what we provide, the value that we try to provide, and we do look at things, I think, a little bit differently than most. And as I say, trying to bring value through the production of what we produce to save you actual physical material money. And if we can show that we can save them money of material, that helps pay our cost and provides value to where, again, that benefits us. But it's tough right now. So we're still waiting on a rebound, and we're still kind of hoping that things loosen up a little bit to where we can get back to winning, at least 8 out of 10 proposals and not 6 out of 10.
Sure. So going off that a little bit, looking towards the future, do you see what particular innovation do you see coming up in the next few years?
Well, the big innovation right now, I think, is there's a lot of move in different glass products for energy. Energy. The energy code when I first got in this business did not exist, and now it's definitely providing a much more efficient product. I see that there's a lot of good things out there right now, but they're so expensive that most people, they would like to utilize it, but they're always value engineering it out for the most part. There's a lot of government projects going on right now where they'll throw stupid money at projects and spend enormous amounts of money. We're involved in a very small job at Arlington National Cemetery, which is the cemetery where all the soldiers are laid here in the U.S., and they're recladding that building to give it a facelift and try to preserve the building. And with that, as has happened in a lot of the government facilities, we have to design those to a rating of a terrorist blast effect, i.e., a bomb setting out on the curb. And that load is much more, that product to provide that is much more expensive. It's much more difficult to analyze. And they're going to make this entire system outside of it because it has stood the test of time in its current state for forever. So they're going to put stainless on there. They're utilizing stainless steel as a part of the actual system. Tremendously expensive. So it's funny how private work, isn't building anything because of a few interest points on the interest rate, and yet the government is able to spend money to do whatever they want to do because we're out there funding it, I guess, through our taxes. But anyway, I'm not real sure that I have any good ideas of innovation. We continue to innovate our own software products, our own tools, our own efficiencies internally. That's always constant work and something necessary to keep us competitive in the market. If we can reduce an hour's worth of time to something of that, we would definitely like to do it. Innovative in our process. 3D modeling was thought to be a great innovation. We actually went out on the forefront with that back in 2021, 2022, of trying to take a three-dimensional model that the architect has jumped on board within a Revit environment to be able to see the building physically and overlay the cladding elements on top of their model, and to get that to work in conjunction to where you can have the model there and to extract everything that you need from the model. Well, that modeling time takes time. But once it's done and once everything coincides with the model, the problem is models are constantly updated. But the intent there is that you can know that it's going to fit, that it's going to work, the dimensions are there. It's all information that we can gather. We can put it into code. We can read that code. We can actually create the part from that code. We can create the length from that code. We can create the copes and the end cuts that need to. We can do all of that. All the technical information is there, and we spent over $1 million just looking into that, trying to get that to be successful, and got awarded our first job with a large contractor. And we thought we were smarter than the average bear. Well, as it turned out, we really hadn't been able to go through and truly vet that in a condition. And what we thought was going to work and what we thought could be modeled, it was just, there was more work to continually update the model, to continue working through the model. The coding of it wasn't difficult, but it was, and it's still being pursued. It's still being done, but it was such a talked about innovation. I finally said, let's go innovate it, and brought on 12 people to get that done. Like I said, spent a ton of money doing it. And in the end, we were really lucky to survive the job. It was not a good job for our client. It wasn't a good job for us. And it just showed that, that we really needed a bigger bankroll in order to make that to happen. And there again, that goes back to being a privateer versus being a funded company that probably has the wherewithal to do that. But that was my big risk reward. That was more of a risk and less reward, but still the concept is there. I know still people are pursuing it, but everybody just saw what thought was going to be a time of magic with the whole submittal process to take a year and turn it to 6 months. It just didn't work out that way for us anyway. And from as far as I know, everybody is doing a little bit of that, but it's kind of lost its traction in our industry at the time. But it is a way that, with AI coming forward, that's the biggest innovation that's going to go on. We've experimented that. I was using it this morning. It's amazing what I was looking for a structural value of a irregular tube, and I brought up Chat GPT and I said, hey, here's the dimensions of my tube. It's got a wall thickness of 0.1. It's this polygon shape. Can you determine a torsional restraining J constant? And it goes to think, and it gives you an estimation. It's not exact, but it's close enough. And those kind of things, I think, are really what the big innovation is coming forward. There's just, in what little I played with it here this second half of the year, even in my podcast work that we talked about, I mean, you could have fed all that stuff in AI that I forwarded you and say, give me an outline to my podcast tomorrow. And I've done that for a guest, and it's right there. It's scripted. Better yet, you can tell who it is, and they'll go find the information of who it is and give responses back to what the guy might actually even respond to your questions. So I think that I see that's a little bit, I think, dangerous. I feel I've done mathematical things in there and see the right math but the wrong conclusion, if that makes some sense. So, that the stress is less than the allowable. Well, no, the stress is greater than the allowable. So he misinterpreted the allowable versus the actual stress. So it's that's the biggest innovation that's gonna flip the world upside down. And
Yeah, sure.
I think everybody needs to jump in and embrace it, because it's going to be there whether we like it or not.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna mix things up.
Yep.
So where do you see yourself taking your business in the next, say, 12 months? What sort of direction do you see yourself leading?
Well, we've got everybody working hard. The proposal work is up, so we're bidding a lot of work. We're reaching out to clients. That's always a must. It's upfront marketing and campaigning for that. Me personally, Shane, my son, actually is the president and runs the company day to day. Everybody, we're working on a transition to get Dad out of the role and allow me to finally embark on retirement. So that's where I hope the next 12 months takes me personally. And in doing that, it's a matter of making sure the legacy lives on. And this is something that Shane wants to continue with, and I know my employees want to continue on with. But that's the next goal, is by my next birthday in June of next year. I hope and I actually hope to start working this out more towards the beginning of 2026, to just devote my early morning time, which I'm at my desk at 5:30, and I love working till about noon, and then that's about the focus of my day. And then I get into all the other stuff. Then I get into, bringing some of our tools up to date, or writing a book. I'm writing a book right now, so I'm working on that. The podcast that my daughter and I have going on. Shane and I have started a podcast internally within Architectural Wall Systems on a weekly basis, and we've just been kind of doing that on our own, kind of as a gig, just to see how it goes. And we finally invited on one of our staff members as a guest, so we're working through that. But just I guess become a hobbyist for me. Shane's got the work in hand, and is really the primary closer and the one that's responsible for day to day. And we've at least accomplished that personality, or that individual, is recognized, kind of as the one to contact through the course of the day. And that seems to work well. And I hope it continues to work well.
That's great to hear. Well, thanks for your time today, Kevin. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Where can people, if people are interested in what you have going on, your business, where can they contact you? What's your website or socials?
Well, we have socials on all the markets. We have socials. We can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us. We've tried making our first campaign of Instagram posts, just kind of promoting our process. Facebook as well. We're seeing how that goes. We're getting a lot more recognition, a lot more response and interaction from that. That's been good. The Architectural Wall Systems website is arcwallsys.com. That's ARCWALL sys.com. That will take you there. It has a link as well to our software products, which there's a few represented there that we use, that we actually market to our clients and to other outside engineers that has been successful. CBeam is one of those. We have a property generation program. We have an estimating tool called SimpleBeam. The properties is called APROP. That is under a website called MCAL Software. That's MCAL software.com. And those are listed there. We are in the process of actually reworking our AWS site. That's live. The MCAL site's also being reworked. That will be live shortly, but the old site's still there. So that's good. Email, you can reach me at K McClintick or Kevin at arkwallsys.com by email. Yeah, and in that, be happy to respond and get your phone information or however else you want to contact me. But you can find me on socials, both Instagram under K McClintick and Facebook under Kevin McClintick. So reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation of whatever sort you want to talk about. So appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your time today, Kevin. Take care. All the best.
Thank you.